This is Castle 1. Castle 1.
I think we're going to go right hand here. Copy that. Copy that.
That's my drive and turning.
Max speed straight ahead. Perfect angle.
Perfect angle. Perfect angle.
Still gaining on the lay line there. Gaining on the lay line there. All boats are below us in the box.
Hey, the spoon here, guys. Good pressure this way. Good pressure this way.
You're looking at 10.5 to 42.
5s at 42.
Welcome back, podcast fans. Thanks again for joining us on another two-part edition of the podcast. And in this edition, we are delving into the world of match racing. It's an area of the sport we've touched on in the past, but not to this degree. So stay tuned to hear a whole load on the dark arts of boat-on-boat racing. Before we get going, a thanks to all of you that got in touch after listening to Ed Baird. So many, many thanks. Your thoughts and your support mean a lot, and it's great to know what you think of the podcast. So thank you. And to those of you that also took the time, thanks for heading over to buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. If you like what we do, please do head over, leave us a message and buy us a coffee or two. I say it every month, but it does make a difference as we keep the podcast ad-free. So to all of you coffee buyers, a big, big thank you. Well, as I've said, this month we're delving into the world of match racing as we chat to eight-time match racing world champion Ian Williams. Ian's a busy man. He's a regular on the Match Racing Pro Tour. He coaches the Danish Sail GP team and last year was the pre-start coach at Ben Ainsley's Ineos Britannia. I've known Ian a long time. Back in my match racing days, there was times that we would train together. And as you hear, Ian is a qualified lawyer. Even in this chat, his answers are very measured. There's some long pauses before he commits to an answer. And that's quite a lawyerly trait. But it's no wonder he's been so successful. His calculated and measured approach to the sport is really fascinating. I hope you enjoy the time I spent with Ian Williams.
I do often say when people ask me about sailing, I say it's better than working for a living, but actually I do know that what working for a living is like. I remember my first senior international event was Leamington Cup, crewing for Richard Sydenham. First race, port entry, Russell Coutts.
Ian Williams, welcome to the podcast. It is long overdue. We have been trying to track you down for a while now, but finally, here we are, sitting in your club, the Royal Leamington Yacht Club. What are you up to in the UK? What's brought you home?
Come back to the UK for a couple of things. A little bit of Cape 31 sailing. And then next week we've got Sail GP where I'm coaching the Danish team.
I have to point out all the photographs behind us in this majestic room at the club. They are from the match racing event that the Royal Leamington used to hold. And it was a big deal, wasn't it, on the circuit?
Yeah, it was. It was one of the I remember sort of getting involved when it was part of the Brute series. I think it was 5 events, and the winner, if you won 3 out of 5, you won a Fabergé egg. We weren't in the frame for that, but I think Russell got the 3 out of 5 and got the Fabergé egg. And then they stopped doing it after that. I guess the insurance wouldn't cover it anymore. I think they didn't think anybody would be able to do it, and it was one of those big 5 back then. Huge inspiration for me as I was getting into match racing, the Royal Leamington Cup, and desperate to get involved. And I was fortunate enough to do 3 of them: 1 as a crew for Richard Sydenham, and 2 as a skipper. Sadly for me, the event stopped before I was really in a position to try and win.
It's a great bit of match racing history, though, isn't it? Laurie Smith, Chris Law.
Yeah,
Jesper
absolutely.
Bank.
Howard Cudmore, Eddie Warden-Owen. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's. I guess it was one of the original events on the World Match Racing Tour, and I think sometimes you forget it only really started in, I guess, the late '80s. The world, the match racing circuit, and really it was as it's coming up. I guess a lot of them without umpires, in the protest room. Yeah, exactly. God. Yeah, imagine that. But yeah, a huge part of the evolution of the sport.
Ian, we have much to talk about. Let's venture back. You're from Exmouth in Devon, a place that's produced a lot of very good British sailing talent. I mean, how did you discover the sport? I did read that you really grew up on boats. What did those early years in the sport look like?
Yeah, both my parents were very keen sailors. My father was a pretty good competitive sailor. He was second at the Olympic trials in a tornado. Merlin Rocket national champion. My mother came from a cruising background. Both parents very keen on cruising. I didn't know my mother's parents particularly well because once he retired, they went cruising around the world and they spent 20 years living on a boat. On my father's side, my grandparents were again big racing sailors, dragons, national 12s, that sort of thing. So very much in the blood. Weekends were spent always on the cruising boat. Summer holidays were always spent cruising to France. Crossed the channel apparently at 6 weeks old on the Contessa 32. So yeah, very much in the blood. No option really other than to grow up sailing. And I guess that's where it all came from.
I'm a little surprised with that pedigree that you're not some kind of offshore sailor. You're not sailing around the world. You're actually just sailing in tiny little circles.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when I was young, I got very seasick. And actually, it's a little bit of an irony. The reason I got into racing sailing is that I actually hated cruising around Lyme Bay on the Contessa 32 at every weekend. And what appeared to be the only way to get out of that was to go and crew in a cadet for Conrad Humphreys, and do sailing club racing. I guess that was the only way they could get free childcare and not have me out cruising with them. So yeah, it's a sort of an irony that I took up racing sailing to get away from another type of sailing.
There was a good scene in Exmouth at that time, wasn't there? I mean, some great names growing up with you. Yeah,
incredibly strong. I think you see that a lot with the top sailors out there. Often they've grown up in a bit of a bubble and you don't realise necessarily how strong it is to start with. But yeah, in the cadet class we had ahead of me people like Jamie Lee, Charlotte Neal, Steph Rousel, Charlotte and Jamie both winning national championships. I think Jamie won the world championships, didn't he, in the cadet? I was crewing for Conrad Humphreys, a strong, and then a little bit, below me as well. People like Stevie Morrison, Ben Rhodes, Joe Glanfield. So, yeah, I was in the sort of middle of that group. And when you do have such a strong group at home, you just push each other on. And as I say, I think you don't realize how good you're getting until you then go out onto the international scene and realize that everybody's pushed each other on and become pretty good.
What did the young Ian Williams look like? What kind of traits did he have?
He was very shy, very quiet, pretty competitive. I played a lot of sport at school. That was really the main motivating factor for me at school, and it was noticeable that before I got into sailing, my grades used to drop off in the summer. Because I didn't have any summer sport. I really enjoyed rugby and hockey in the winter and did better actually at school as a result of having that sort of, I guess, outlet. But what I would say is I didn't really like practicing sport. I didn't have the right sort of maturity or the right attitude to training up. But I just loved going out and racing. And actually that works in sailing because you can sort of practice while you're racing. You go out and do club Saturday afternoon racing, and you're getting better all the time doing that.
Weren't you a bit of a chess master? Is that right?
Yes, and again, until I got into sailing, I was very strong when I was 9. I was school champion at 9. In school, went up to 13, and I was playing for the county, going to national tournaments. But yeah, two things really stopped me playing chess. One was getting busy with sailing and other sports, and the other was that they started telling me that I had to start writing down my moves and studying other people's moves and reading books and that sort of thing. And that just sounded a lot like school study that I didn't really enjoy. I really enjoyed it when it was all about working it out for myself. As soon as I was told I had to copy other people and learn from other people, that didn't sound nearly as interesting. And so, yeah, that sort of died away.
Interesting. I suspect we might come back to that. I mean, you're only a couple of months younger, aren't you, than Ben Ainsley? Ben's been on the podcast, of course, as has Ian Percy, and they both talk about how competitive the sailing scene was in the UK as a kid, as a nipper. I mean, did you grow up and develop in that scene with those guys?
Not so much, actually, because I chose not to go into the youth squad, or maybe it didn't choose me, one or the other. When I came out of cadets, I still didn't really see sailing as my main sport around that age, I guess 16. I probably enjoyed rugby the most. Wasn't particularly good. I was much better at hockey, which I probably considered my main sport. And frankly, I was too big for to helm a 420, and I couldn't sail a laser at all well. And also you're looking there at Ben Ainsley and Ian Percy and saying, well, there's no chance of ever competing. And so I wasn't particularly motivated to go into that area. And really, it was a little bit by chance that I sort of fell into the match racing side of things.
Unlike a lot of us, Ian, you actually had a proper job, didn't you, with qualifications? It's quite surprising, really, because most of the pro sailors that we talked to on the podcast seem to have gone straight from school to the sail off to life as a pro. But you took a different route.
Yeah, I do often say when people ask me about sailing, I say it's better than working for a living, and they always laugh, but actually I do know that what working for a living is like, unlike some of my colleagues. Again, I think it ties into the fact that around 16 to 20, I wasn't particularly expecting. I guess there was always in the back of my mind, a desire to be, not so much be a professional sailor, but achieve what I wanted to in the sport. But at the same time, I probably didn't see the path, didn't really have the confidence or whatever it was. And so certainly I didn't envisage it as being my life, and I thought I needed to have a real job. And so went to university. I did chemistry and law at university. That led me into applying for jobs at law firms, and I got one, and that's where I ended up.
All the time you were match racing. Match racing doesn't really happen in the UK club scene, does it? I mean, how did you get into that? How did that develop?
Yeah, it was kind of by chance that Richard Sydenham asked me to crew for him on his youth team. He'd crewed for his brother the year before with Adam May on the bow. They'd won the national championships, which got you an entry into what was kind of an unofficial world championship in New Zealand. They'd done well. I think they were second there. And Lee, Richard's older brother, was too old, so Richard was going to take the helm, and from the same club. And he asked me to come and do the middle, which was a fantastic opportunity. And we went, and we obviously won the nationals and went to New Zealand and won that regatta as well. And so, yeah, it was a great start.
Was it at that moment, do you think, that you knew you'd found your thing, that you were hooked on the sport and the discipline?
I think it was massively inspiring for me going to New Zealand. It was, let me get this right, it would have been 1994, probably November in 1994. We went out a week early to get over the jet lag, which coincided with the Steinlager Cup, and all the top guys, Coots, Baird, etc., were doing the Steinlager Cup. And it also coincided with the Team New Zealand leaving party at the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron to go and do the America's Cup in San Diego. And it was all over the TV, the news, the adverts. I mean, TVNZ were a sponsor, so they had a lot of coverage. And back then in New Zealand, I guess there were only one or two TV channels, and so you saw it all. And I think definitely opened my eyes to what the possibilities were in the sport. Until then, I'd seen full-time sailing as purely an Olympic pursuit. And the America's Cup hadn't really featured on my radar. If we think, there was a big one in 87, but, I was only 10 years old then, and it was early in the morning. I remember my older brother was really into it. He'd be getting up at 5 a.m. to go and watch it, and I saw a little bit of it. But, with 4-hour races, when you're 10 years old, it's hard to get inspired, to be honest with you. So that trip to New Zealand in '94, I think, really opened my eyes to what the possibilities were. And I think it was part of the seed, a big part of the seed for me of the America's Cup as a dream.
Certainly a different vibe from Exmouth, I imagine.
Yes, yeah, very, very different vibe to Exmouth, that's for sure.
Let's talk about your first big event on the pro circuit. I mean, how intimidating was that? At the time, the match racing tour was the place to be, wasn't it? All the America's Cup legends, head to head on a pro circuit. How intimidating was all of that?
I don't think I ever really saw it as intimidating. I just saw it as an incredible opportunity. I remember my first senior international event was Leamington Cup, crewing for Richard Sydenham. I'm pretty sure it was 1995, maybe 96. First race, port entry, Russell Coutts. And you're like, what an incredible opportunity, because nobody expects you to be anywhere near, right? There's no pressure, but you're getting to find out, how bad you are, how good you are, where your level is, how far behind, of course we're behind, how far behind are we? And in equal equipment, which, again, I don't think there's anywhere else in the sport where you could go up against, probably at the time, most people considered the best sailor in the world. You can go up in equal equipment, against that person and really find out where you were. So, yeah, not hugely intimidating, really just, as I say, an incredible opportunity to go and find out where you were and learn, and learn from the best in the sport.
What did you learn from that event? How did it go?
We did okay. I think we just narrowly missed out on progressing into the next round. But we were in a group with, thinking back a long way, it's 30 years ago, but we were in a group with Russell Coutts, Peter Gilmore, Ed Baird, Stuart Childerley, Andy Beadsworth. That's most of them. And we had to finish in the top half. And Marcus Visa. And we weren't actually far off. So I think actually what we learned is that although we weren't good enough, we weren't actually as far off as perhaps we thought before we started the regatta.
Interesting. I love that you remember all those, all the details, all the names. I have spoken to a few people before we met today, and one of which was Andrew Pindar, who has supported you, hasn't he, for 2 decades. And he tells the story that he'd been invited to watch the St. Moritz match racing event, one of your first probably pro tour outings. And Peter Holmberg said to him, "Watch that kid, pointing at you racing. He's good." And Andrew approached you, he says, there and then to offer you sponsorship. I mean, he's been a huge support ever since. How valuable has it been to have that support from such an early stage?
Yeah, it's been everything. I think, without some financial support, there's no chance to progress, certainly as quickly as we did once we got onto the tour. That was 2006. We'd been on the tour for about a year, but in reality, you're kind of you're scraping it together. You're I guess using the prize money to fund the events. Puts quite a lot of pressure on and what have you. But I think it was a massive release and boost signing that first deal with Andrew. Actually, I remember very clearly to my mind, we came to an agreement. I just landed in Bermuda for the 2006 Gold Cup. Is when we finally agreed terms, etc. And we then went on and won that regatta. And you sort of see it two ways. You think, well, if I'd waited till we'd won the regatta, maybe I could have, negotiated a little bit harder. But actually, I don't see it that way. I see it more like, knowing that I had that backing. It was a year and it was the end of that year and the next year deal. Knowing I had that, and being able, therefore, to plan the season and get the crew locked in, etc., I think was actually quite a big release and probably had a big impact on helping me actually win that regatta in the first place. So yeah, huge boost. The guys were turning around, were saying, a bit low here, Ian, a bit low. They turned around and I was actually fast asleep holding the tiller. In the pre-start, it'd be sort of 2 minutes to go and you'd be like, yeah, I quite fancy his spot. That really got me into thinking about how did he get there, with 2 minutes to go, how did he get into that position. We spent a long time analysing those races and eventually figured out a way to beat him, and it was like a switch.
I match raced for a bit back in the late 90s. I don't know if you remember that. You probably remember everything, don't you? We trained a bit together. And, you were, a kid really, a young kid, but absolutely unbeatable when it came to boat on boat, already in another league. But we could sometimes take you on if it was more about pace, I remember. Do you remember all that training in the Cayman Islands? I think we were getting ready for the ISAF Worlds as it was then.
I do. I don't know if you like funny stories on this podcast, but I have actually quite a funny story. We were out doing it. We did a lot of tuning. We were preparing for a fleet race regatta, really, weren't we? But I think you were also doing a lot of match racing, so we mixed it up a bit. But anyway, I had this terrible reaction to the mosquito bites, and I got some antihistamines, but they were drowsy antihistamines. And when I was around that age, I used to have a bit of a problem with dozing off after sort of lunchtime. And there was one time we were doing a tuning run. You probably thought you were doing great, but the guys were turning, were saying, a bit low here, Ian, a bit low. They turned around and I was actually fast asleep holding the tiller during a tuning run. But yeah, I know I do remember that. That was. I think the criticism is fair, actually, and that was one of the big, call it an epiphany, I had. Later than that, around 2003, we spent my first World Championship in Garda, Match Racing World Championship. Spent the whole week debriefing why we went the wrong way. And it literally took me a couple of months to realise, actually, we can't have gone the wrong way every time. We just obviously weren't fast enough, at that level. And that, it was a high level. I remember Russell, again, he was sixth at that event. Ed Baird, I'm pretty sure, won that. So yeah, that was a big realization, is that we just had to be faster, and it makes everything else a lot easier if you're faster.
Like in any boat. It's hard to tell though in match racing, isn't it? Because you're given the boat, the sails are normally used. It's tricky, and people aren't just sailing at optimum pace. I think it's often hard to tell.
You don't get lineups. If you're ever lined up, you're trying to squeeze off or hang in the lane, and then you're splitting, almost all the time. There's a lot of manoeuvres. So is it straight line speed, or is it the manoeuvre that's costing you, or is it tactical? Are you on the wrong side? And I think being able to diagnose that quickly is a huge part of it. And yes, the lesson for me is if you're always losing out, it's probably not the tactics.
If you're falling asleep on the tune-ups, yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, I found a solution to that, so that was we improved.
Quite quickly into competing on the pro circuit, you left the legal profession to go full time. Talk to us about that decision, leaving a well-paid profession to become a pro sailor. What was the ambition? What was the plan behind that?
The ambition was definitely to win the America's Cup for Britain, and I guess what does that mean? That means try and be in an influential position in a British team that can win. When I think back, probably trying to put some detail on that, probably had in mind that I maybe had a shot at being maybe a starting helmsman, because that was a thing back then, and my starting I felt was pretty strong. I think I was probably aware that I wasn't at that time the fastest helmsman, and so if there was an opportunity to be a starting helmsman or something like that, I guess that was the ambition. But there were a few triggers for the timing around it. One was that we'd been in the top 10 in the world in match racing for a couple of years, but didn't feel like we were going to break into the top 5. And that was just down to the amount of time that I could spend. Ashurst, my law firm, were really good. They gave me extra unpaid time off. I had an extra 10 days a year on top of the 22 days of holiday. But that still only meant 5-6 regattas a year, which we weren't going to progress on that. But also on the other side, I was now a qualified lawyer. I was starting to get more responsibility, and the reality of that world is, when you're on holiday, you're not really on holiday, and I didn't see it being possible to properly focus on match race regattas and sustain the job I was sort of moving towards. And so it felt like it was a real decision point. And I guess the third thing is that as we got closer to the 2007 America's Cup, the Cup skippers started to focus more on their 2-boat tuning, less on the World Match Racing Tour, and then the opportunities came up. So I started to get more invites to World Match Racing Tour events, or Swedish Match Tour at the time. And so then it was also, the opportunity was there at that time.
Talk us through how the match racing tour works. I mean, you have to get a slot, don't you? You have to be invited, you win points to attend the big events. How tough was that starting out, and what's that like today? How hard is it today?
Well, I think it's gone through several evolutions. Initially, the match race tour was just a straight invite-only events, and each event invited whoever they wanted, and generally, for obvious reasons, tended to focus on the cup sailors or the local hero, or the country's Olympic gold medalists. Then the match race rankings came along and started to become more prominent, and I guess it was ISAF or whatever it was before ISAF, or World Sailing. I've gone through several. They started to put in stipulations to have a grade 1 event. You had to get a certain number of points, certain people on the ranking list, and so the ranking list then did become a way to get in, and that was, I really saw that as the way to get invited, to improve the ranking. So when I was trying to break in, though, as I said, we were in the top 10 for 2 years. I don't think I got a single invite to the World Match Racing Tour in that time, between sort of 03 and 05. But as I say, as the top cup guys started moving out, that's when they started coming. Around 2000, my first tour event was 2005 in Germany, and that's where the opportunity came.
Who did you look up to back then? Who were your match racing heroes?
I'd say undoubtedly Russell was the guy. He just seemed to have this ability to turn it on when he needed. My early experience with the top events, we watched that one in New Zealand that I referred to earlier. We went and did a couple of qualifiers in '99 for tour events. I did a New Zealand qualifier for Steinlager, didn't get through. Same in Bermuda, just missed out on tie break to Jimmy Spittle of all people in 1999. and Russell won both those events, and, with us watching. And then I remember sailing against him, and I learned a lot. I always thought, I wish I was where he was right now. I'm talking about the pre-start, and obviously during the race he was often ahead as well. But in the pre-start, it'd be sort of 2 minutes to go, and you'd be like, yeah, I quite fancy his spot. And then that really got me into thinking about how did he get there? 2 minutes to go, how did he get into that position? And it really opened my eyes that the pre-start was a whole 4 minute, chance to try and take control of the race. So yeah, I think he was definitely, when I was getting into it, he was definitely the king.
Is there anyone else that you'd look at and think, oh no, I dreaded it going up against them? Why was that?
I guess there were a couple of other a few other big influences, big rivals. I'd say that Jimmy Spittle was incredibly hard to beat in certain boats, in certain conditions. Soon as it was powered up conditions, he was just incredibly fast upwind, and not just against us, against everybody. He was, so around sort of 2004, 2005 was very, very strong. Ben Ainsley came and won the 2010 World Championship. Incredible how he, with it's not right to say less experience, but less. A lot of us have been doing the tour for quite a long time. We'd been to all the venues, sailed those boats for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. He'd done a lot less, certainly recently, and was able to come and what incredible finisher, just able to get the job done when it counted. With less experience of the venues in particular, and those particular boats in certain instances. So very strong. And I guess the other big one for us was Peter Gilmore, because when I started the tour, he was the guy that was winning. He won the tour 05, 06 when I got onto it. And as we were getting better, he was always the guy we'd come up against and lose to. And we spent a long time analysing those races, as you can imagine, and eventually figured out a way to beat him. And it was like a switch. We went from losing every race to then winning quite comfortably against him. And I think there's a big element of kind of paper, scissors, stones about match racing. And if he was paper, we figured out how to be scissors, and from there we were very strong against him. So that was quite an interesting experience going through that, and then realizing we could win.
When you're sitting next to someone on a plane and they ask what you do, what do you say? What's your answer? I mean, this is very niche, isn't it? Narrow in a way.
I guess I just say I race sailing boats. And then if they start asking intelligent questions, then I guess I get more into the detail of what I do, whether that's match racing or now more coaching in recent times.
What do you think it takes? What skills do you need to be successful in match racing?
For me, it's match racing is so much about the team, and getting the right blend of teammates together is certainly the first hurdle, and a part of that is the finance as well. We mentioned Andrew Pindar and the sponsorship that he brought. Trying to understand the trade-offs between having a consistent team and having a quality team, and I talk to people about this all the time on all sorts of programs. The best people are busy people, and they can't always commit to everything, and so you've got to then decide: do you get the people you really want, and they can only do 4 out of 7 events, or do you get the person that can do all and do more practice? And there's no right answer to that. There's different ways of approaching it. But finding a way to get that team working together to get everything out of the whole team, for me, is certainly when I started, because I was always I was very green. Like I said, I didn't do youth squad, I hadn't done as many hours on the water as all my competitors, and so I saw my route to the top as to get essentially sailors who are better than me on board and lean on their skills, use the skills that I had, and I think something about me is I have some very strong areas, but also some weaker areas, and if I could lean on those strengths and used other people to cover the paper over the cracks, as it were, then we could be a strong team. And I think that was for me the thing that made us successful.
The match racing youth worlds are just around the corner. I think they're in Poland at the end of the month. So your next answer could be very useful to any of those teams going. What do you think are the 5 golden rules of match racing?
I think that this is specific to match race regattas rather than match racing in particular, but when you're going and sailing a new boat, it's just about the speed of progression in that boat that you haven't probably sailed that much before, and you have to be fast. You've got to find a way to get that boat by the end of the regatta, or I always say by your last race. If you win your last race in match racing, you've normally won the regatta, and so whenever that comes, your last race, you've got to be sailing it at a pretty high level in terms of the setup, and you've got however long that is to get to that level, and that's not very long. If you do an Olympic campaign, you spend 4 years working on all these details and being super fast. You've got a week to get as close to that as possible, and so really, boat speed is the one key thing that you have to get sorted. After that, you asked me for 5. Wow. I think we'll maybe come back to that question.
Okay, I think we've got the key anyway. How formulaic is match racing? I mean, your responses to another skipper's action, how thought through is all that?
I guess it depends who you ask. In my world, it's pretty formulaic. For various reasons, I have a very structured approach. I have kind of set plays that I play out that are pre-thought, and that's how I find it best to operate. But I don't think it has to be. I think there are other very successful match racers out there who are much more instinctive. They do it very much more on the fly, and that can work for them. For me, I think the big reason for that is lack of practice opportunities. Most of the top match racers come out of what I would call a match race centre, whether that's Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, whether that's the setup in Perth, or what they've had in GKSS in Sweden or in Copenhagen in Denmark. And for me, we had quite a good scene with the BT National Championships, but we never really had a kind of central match race base where I could get together with my crew and go training, 2-3 times a week like a lot of the others did. So my development was very much through visualization and making those strategies and set plays and writing them down and going through them in my head and getting the boats out and on the table and going through options like that. I spent a lot of time doing that. And I think as a result, you end up with a sort of formulaic approach to it as opposed to an instinctive pattern-based reaction.
And with that in mind, Ian, how much homework is required and how aware of your opponent's playbook are you and their likelihood to respond in a particular manner?
I think I'd get a different answer from different people. I remember Roy Heiner saying he would really study other teams and really sort of go for their weakness. I actually took a very different approach, and I think it's a psychological thing. I actually remember very clearly struggling to beat Stefan Lindbergh. And I was like, how are we going to beat this guy? How are we going to beat this guy? And then one day I thought, well, hang on, we're pretty good at this. We're pretty fast. We can read the shifts well. We got the start under control. How's he going to beat us? And actually that was like a light bulb going off. And suddenly we were able to beat him by turning that around. And sort of from that day on, I haven't actually focused on other boats. I've always gone with the approach that we're a strong team. We've got all the bases covered. If we just go with our plays, we should be good. I think going on a little, many years on, there are certain people who have particular strengths, and you definitely try to avoid them. People like Ben, like Taylor Canfield, I always felt they were very good if you end up in a sort of messy situation in the pre-start involving umpires, etc. I always felt that they had maybe an advantage there. And if we could keep the umpires out of the game and keep it formulaic, then the advantage was switched back to us. So there are certain people that you change slightly and try and focus more on staying on your game plan. But that was really the goal, is to stay with our game plan as opposed to necessarily exploit other teams' weaknesses.
Can that make you predictable to your opponents?
Yeah, especially with YouTube. I find it with some of the young guys coming through now, and you can see that they've seen a lot of videos and they've studied it a lot, and they do, to an extent, know what we're going to do. I think that's a concern, and it's something we have to counter. I still come from the position that we're more moves ahead. So I see it a little bit like a chess game. We're white. We get to dictate the game, and as long as we don't make a mistake, we can still come out ahead. But for sure, a lot of them know what we're going to do, which means we just have to be more accurate with our execution.
Interesting. My son is always watching match racing on YouTube.
Yeah, and that's a big difference. We didn't have that. I mean, one of the things that that's made me, I think, quite different in my match racing approach is that we're self-taught. I mean, I still distinctly remember, and this is like a couple of years into it, thinking, wouldn't it be useful to know where the ley line is for the committee boat? And going out and like, yeah, okay, that's a good idea, and sort of looking at that before the start and getting it, it's one. And this was a couple of years into match racing, and I probably spent 2 years without ever thinking, because we didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't know anything. I suspect when we match raced with Richard, we were probably quite fast. I don't really remember, but I suspect that's what won us the races. Because when I think back, we knew nothing. We really did. I suspect we were just sailing quite well, the handling and the boat speed and reading the shifts pretty well. But in terms of the actual details of the match racing, we really, really did know nothing. And there was no book to read, no videos. I guess you could watch America's Cup, but massively different game. And so, yes, all kind of self-taught in that regard.
That's it for part one as we leave Ian there. An 8-time world champion, admitting that the learning curve in competitive sailing can be pretty steep. Amazing, though, to think that Ian and his talented team were self-taught in such a complex area of the sport. A big thanks to Ian for sitting down with us. Ian, many thanks. And we recorded the podcast at the fantastic Royal Leamington Yacht Club. So a big thanks for the loan of the meeting room and for your hospitality. It is a beautiful spot there on the southern edge of the New Forest, nestled on the western end of the Solent. To the team at the club, a big thanks. Again, if you like what we're doing and you're loving your fix of sailing chat, do head over to buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast and support the work we do on the podcast. It means a lot and helps us put the whole thing together ad-free every month. Before I go, the usual heartfelt thanks to the very talented Tim at Vertigo Films for producing the podcasts. Tim, many, many thanks for all your efforts. And so that's us. Do tune into part 2 with Ian. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Have fun on the water and sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1. Castle 1.
Yeah, I think we're going to get right hand in. Copy that. Copy that.
That's my drive and turning.
Max speed straight ahead. Perfect angle.
Perfect angle. Perfect angle.
Still gaining on the ley line there. Gaining on the ley line there. All boats are below us in the box.
Hey, the speed here, guys. Good pressure this way. Good pressure this way.
We're looking at 10-5 to 42. This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.